I still remember the day my son, Daniel, was born. He was tiny, fragile, with these little fists that would curl around my fingers, and I felt a love I never knew existed. From that day on, my life was his. I fed him, cared for him, stayed up nights when he cried, and celebrated every little milestone with him. When he took his first step, when he spoke his first words, when he fell and scraped his knee, I was there. I thought, and I truly believed, that no matter how old he got, he would always need me, always love me, and always come back to me. Daniel grew up into this wonderful, kind-hearted boy. Smart, funny, a little stubborn at times, but always gentle. We shared everything: laughter, secrets, little Sunday morning pancakes, late night talks when he had school worries. I felt proud, not just as a mother, but as a friend. When he turned 24, he met Emily. Emily was sweet, charming, and seemed genuinely fond of him. I welcomed her with open arms because all I ever wanted was for Daniel to be happy. I thought, great, he has someone to love him like I do. I remember making her favorite cookies the first time she came over. I was nervous, yet excited, wanting everything to be perfect. But I didn't know it then. I didn't know that once Daniel and Emily's relationship turned serious, I would slowly, painfully start to lose my son. It started small. At first, Daniel would stay over later than usual at Emily's place. I would call him in the evenings, and he'd be busy with her or her family. I told myself, it's normal, they're in love, he'll come back to me. But then the calls became shorter, less frequent. Sometimes I'd call, and he wouldn't answer at all. One Sunday, I baked his favorite chocolate cake. I left it on the counter and sent him a message. Hey, sweetie, I made your favorite cake. Come over and let's have some Sunday time together. Miss you. An hour passed. 2. Then I got a text back. Mom, sorry, Emily and I are busy today. Maybe another time. Another time. Those 2 words pierced me more than he could ever imagine. He had never said that to me before. Not for a birthday, not for a school event, not even when he had a fever as a child. And now it felt like he was putting a wall between us. I tried not to show it. I didn't want to fight with my son. I just felt the first pangs of heartbreak. That night, I sat on the couch, staring at the half-lit kitchen, the cake still sitting there, untouched. I whispered to myself, is this how it begins? Is this how I lose him? Weeks turned into months. Daniel and Emily got married, and I was happy for them. I truly was. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was becoming invisible in my own son's life. At first, it was subtle. I wasn't invited to every small dinner, every weekend outing. But then came the holidays. The first holiday after their marriage was Thanksgiving. I was expecting Daniel to come by, like old times, maybe bring Emily along. I cooked a huge meal: turkey, stuffing, mashed potatoes, pumpkin pie. I even set the table with his favorite dishes. But no one came. No call, no text, nothing. I sat alone at the table that evening, staring at the empty chair where my son should have been. I cried quietly, trying to hold back the sobs because I didn't want the neighbors to hear. I remembered all the Thanksgiving dinners I had spent with him growing up, and now I realized that the world he had created for himself no longer had space for me. That night I wrote in my journal, I raised him with love, with every beat of my heart. I stayed awake, worried, prayed for him every night. And now I feel like a stranger in my own home. Did I do something wrong? Did I fail him? It's strange how slowly the distance grew. It wasn't violent, it wasn't cruel, at least not intentionally, but it was real. It was the quiet kind of betrayal that cuts deeper than any argument ever could. My son, my little boy, was slipping away, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. The next few months after Daniel's marriage were the hardest. I tried to stay positive, convincing myself that he was just busy adjusting to a new life. But the truth hurt more than I expected. It wasn't just that he was busy, it was the way he was busy. Phone calls went unanswered, texts were short and polite, never asking about me. Birthdays, anniversaries, even small family gatherings, I was either forgotten or invited at the last minute after everyone else had already made plans. I remember one evening in particular. I called Daniel to check in on him after a long day at work. My voice was warm, full of love, as always. "Hi, Daniel. How's it going?" he said, a hint of cheer in his voice, but it felt hollow, rushed. "I was just thinking about you, Daniel. How's everything with Emily? Are you settling into the new apartment okay?" I asked, trying to sound cheerful, not desperate. "Oh, we're fine, Mom. Busy with work, you know. Listen, I gotta go. Talk later." Click. Just like that. No, "I love you," no, "thanks for checking," nothing. I sat on the edge of my bed, holding the phone, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. It wasn't a fight. It wasn't even anger. It was something worse. A quiet, creeping sorrow that told me I was slowly losing my son. Emily's role in this slowly became apparent, though I tried to ignore it. At first, I told myself I was imagining things, but then came small moments that stung like tiny knives. One weekend, I decided to visit Daniel unannounced, hoping to surprise him and Emily with homemade muffins. I had called ahead earlier, and he had said, "Sure, Mom, come by." But when I arrived, Emily greeted me at the door, her smile polite but stiff.
"Oh, hi, Mrs. Parker. Daniel's in the middle of something, maybe later," she said, not even giving me a hug. "Is Daniel here?" I asked, trying to keep my tone calm. "He's busy," Emily said, glancing at her phone. "Maybe another time. We've got plans." I stood there for a moment, the muffins heavy in my hands, the smell of chocolate filling the hallway. And then I realized Daniel wasn't busy. He was choosing to stay away, choosing Emily's world over mine. I walked home that day in silence, my heart aching with a pain I couldn't put into words. The oven mitts smelled like chocolate, like the comfort I used to share with my son, now replaced by something I wasn't part of anymore. I tried to hold on to hope. I thought maybe it was just a phase. Maybe after some time they would let me back in. But every holiday, every birthday, every small event made it clearer. My place in my son's life was shrinking. Christmas came that year, and I remember the sting vividly. I had baked cookies for Daniel and Emily, wrapped a small gift with a note that said, "Love always, Mom." I drove to their apartment with a heart full of hope. I imagined Daniel's face lighting up, the warm hug, the laughter we used to share. Instead, I was met with Emily's apologetic smile. "Mom, Daniel's at his in-laws. He said he'll call you later." Later. That word again. Later, always later, never now. I sat in my car for a long time, gripping the steering wheel, trying to hold back tears. I thought of all the nights I stayed awake worrying about him, all the sacrifices I made, all the love I poured into him, and now he couldn't even make time for me on Christmas. It wasn't anger I felt, it was betrayal, the quiet kind, the slow kind, that eats away at your heart. I realized then that my son wasn't forgetting me on purpose, he didn't even notice. Emily's presence, her influence, the life they were building together, it had pushed me to the edges of his world without him even realizing it. I started writing letters to him, even though I didn't send them. I poured my heart onto paper. "I miss you. I love you. I don't want to fight. I just want my son back." I held on to the hope that somehow, someday, he would read them and understand. But life continued. Daniel's visits became rare, his calls even rarer. I realized that I was no longer a priority. The mother who had spent a lifetime nurturing, loving, and guiding him had become almost invisible. And that's when the sorrow turned into a quiet desperation, a need to remind him of the bond we once had. I didn't want to fight. I didn't want to accuse or beg. I just wanted my son to see me again. As the months turned into years, the distance between Daniel and me grew wider, like a river I couldn't cross no matter how hard I tried. I watched from the sidelines as his life moved forward, new jobs, vacations, dinners with Emily's family, but I was no longer part of it. The house that once echoed with his laughter felt emptier than ever, even when I was surrounded by friends or neighbors. I tried not to blame Emily. I really did. I knew she loved him and I had welcomed her into our family. But it hurt. Oh, it hurt more than I thought possible, seeing how easily my son slipped away. I wasn't just losing his attention, I was losing his heart, the bond that had defined my life for over 2 decades. I remember the first major family event I wasn't invited to. It was Daniel's promotion celebration. His older cousin had emailed me, apologizing, "Mom, they wanted it to be a small gathering with just close friends and Emily's family." Small gathering, just Emily's family. My own son's achievement, and I wasn't considered close enough to be there. I remember staring at my phone, gripping it like it was my lifeline, feeling a sharp pang of betrayal. After all those years of guiding him, supporting him, and cheering him on, I was suddenly irrelevant. That night, I sat in my favorite armchair, the one he used to crawl into when he had bad dreams. I cried, not in anger, but in quiet heartbreak. I whispered to the empty room, "Daniel, my son, do you even remember me anymore? Do you remember the nights I stayed awake waiting for you to come home from school, or the times I held your hand when you were sick? Do you even notice that I'm here?" He didn't. He couldn't. Life had moved on for him, and I was left behind, holding memories like fragile glass in my hands, terrified that if I let go, they would shatter. One day, I decided to confront him, not angrily, not harshly, but gently, like I always had. I called him while he was at work. "Hey, Mom," he said, his voice cheerful but distant. "Daniel, can we talk? I miss you," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Oh, yeah, sure, Mom. I'm kind of busy, but we can chat later, okay?" Later, that word again. I could feel the ache rising in my chest, a heavy weight that made it hard to breathe. "Daniel, I don't want to fight. I miss my son. I miss spending time with you. I feel like you're slipping away and I don't know how to reach you." There was silence on the other end, then a soft, hesitant voice. "Mom, I didn't mean to make you feel that way. Things are different now. Emily and we have a life together. I'm busy, you know?"
Busy, different, life together. Words that felt like walls, pushing me further and further out. I wanted to scream, to beg, to tell him that no matter how busy, no matter how different life got, he would always be my son, and I would always be here. But I didn't. I swallowed the lump in my throat and whispered, "I understand. I love you, Daniel. Always." That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering where it all went wrong. Did I do something to push him away? Was I too involved, too protective, too everything? Or was this just what happens when a child grows up, falls in love, and forgets the home that raised him? Holidays became unbearable. Thanksgiving, Christmas, his birthday. I tried to make the best of it, but the absence of my son made every celebration hollow. I would bake, decorate, and call him, only to be met with excuses or postponed plans. It wasn't that he didn't love me. I knew he did, somewhere deep down. But life had taken him in a different direction, and I was no longer part of that path. I found myself replaying memories constantly. The first time he rode a bike without training wheels, the time he cried because his first crush ignored him, the evenings we spent on the couch, sharing stories, jokes, dreams. All of it felt like a lifetime ago. And now, I was just watching. Even small gestures that once meant the world now hurt. A missed call, a forgotten text, a polite but distant voice on the other end. It all added up, like drops of water wearing away stone, slowly eroding the closeness we had once shared. And yet, I couldn't give up. I couldn't stop loving him. He was my son,
the center of my world, and no matter how distant he became, I held on to the hope that one day he would see me again, not as a mother who fusses, who worries, who nags, but as the woman who gave him everything she had and still loved him unconditionally. The next year was even harder. Daniel and Emily seemed to have a life that no longer had room for me. It wasn't just the missed calls or the postponed visits anymore. It was the way I was completely sidelined from everything important in their world. I remember the first time I felt it painfully clear. Daniel had been offered a big promotion at work, a position he had worked tirelessly for years to earn. Naturally, I wanted to celebrate him, like I had celebrated every achievement since he was a child. I baked a small cake, picked out a card, and drove over, excited to share in his happiness. When I arrived, Emily greeted me at the door. There was that same polite stiffness, that distance that had grown over the years. "Oh, hi, Mrs. Parker," she said, smiling in that way that didn't reach her eyes. "Daniel's having a small celebration with his work colleagues. Maybe another time, Mom?" I froze, my hands clutching the cake. "Another time?" I asked, softly, my voice trembling. "Yes, another time," she repeated, her tone final, like a door closing. I didn't go in. I stood there for a few moments, the smell of the cake mingling with the faint aroma of Daniel's apartment. I imagined him inside, smiling and laughing with everyone else, and felt like an intruder in my own son's life. I drove home in silence, tears blurring the passing streetlights. That night, I cried myself to sleep, clutching my pillow as if it were him. "Why does it feel like I'm losing you, Daniel?" I whispered to the empty room. The months that followed were filled with small, cutting moments. Family dinners that I wasn't invited to, photos of Daniel and Emily traveling that I would see online before he even bothered to call, holidays that were celebrated without me, with no acknowledgement or even a thought. I started questioning myself constantly. Had I been too involved in his life when he was growing up? Had I let him see me as a safety net he could always return to, so he didn't need to make me a priority? Or was this simply what happens when children grow up and choose their own families? One day, I decided to confront Emily, not out of anger, but out of a desperate need to understand. I called her, my hands shaking as I waited for her to answer. "Hi, Emily, it's Mrs. Parker. I I just wanted to ask, I feel like I'm being pushed out. Daniel, he doesn't call anymore, doesn't visit. I just want to understand. Am I doing something wrong?" There was a long pause. Then Emily spoke, her voice careful, almost rehearsed. "Oh, Mrs. Parker, it's not that. We love you, really. It's just Daniel and I have a life together now. We're busy, you know?" Busy. That word again. I felt it like a cold hand gripping my heart. "I understand that you have a life together, Emily. I do. But I raised him. I've been there every step of the way. I don't want to intrude. I just want to be part of my son's life." Another pause. "We appreciate that, really. Maybe you can visit sometime when we're free." "Maybe," I whispered, knowing deep down that someday might never come. That evening, I sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at the empty chair across from me. I thought of all the birthdays, all the holidays, all the times I stayed awake worrying about him. And now, I realized that no amount of love could force my son to make me a priority. Yet, despite everything, I couldn't give up. I couldn't stop loving him. He was my son, the center of my world, and no matter how distant he became, I held on to the hope that one day he would see me again, not as a mother who fusses, who worries, who nags, but as the woman who gave him everything she had and still loved him unconditionally.
But the truth was undeniable. The man I had raised with so much love was becoming a stranger. And with every passing day, the sense of betrayal grew, not from Daniel alone, but from the life he was building that seemed to leave me behind. I began to realize that I wasn't just grieving the absence of my son's attention, I was grieving the bond I once thought unbreakable. And that grief was heavy, crushing, almost unbearable at times. The years went by, and I found myself living in a quiet house that once felt full of laughter. Daniel's room was still there, untouched, a capsule of memories from his childhood. Sometimes I would sit on his old bed, tracing the scratches on the wooden frame he had made with his little hands, and I would cry, not for what had been, but for what I was losing. I tried to keep busy, volunteering at the local library, joining a small book club, meeting friends for coffee, but every achievement, every small pleasure felt hollow without my son. The holidays were the worst. I would decorate the house, cook the meals, wrap little gifts, and call Daniel. And every time I would get the same response: postponed plans, brief texts, polite excuses. I started to question myself constantly. Had I failed as a mother? Had I done something to push him away? Sometimes I even wondered if my constant care when he was growing up had made him feel suffocated. Maybe he wanted independence, space, a life without the shadow of his mother. And yet, I couldn't stop loving him. No matter how distant he became, I still thought of him constantly. I worried about him, about Emily, about their life. I prayed every night that he would be safe, happy, and fulfilled. Even when he ignored my calls, even when he forgot birthdays, I held on to the hope that he would one day realize how much he had always meant to me. One afternoon, I decided to call Daniel. Not texting, not messaging, but calling. My hands shook as I dialed his number. When he answered, his voice sounded surprised. "Mom? Hi. It's been a while," he said. "Yes, it has," I replied softly. "Daniel, I miss you. I miss our talks, our time together. I know you're busy, I understand, but I feel like I'm losing you, and I don't know how to stop it." There was silence on the other end. I could hear him breathing, as if the words I had spoken were heavier than he expected. "Mom, I didn't realize. I mean, I know I've been distant, but I didn't know it hurt you this much," he said finally, his voice unsteady. My heart ached. Even now, after all these years, I wanted to tell him that it wasn't too late, that I would always be here. "Daniel, it's not about blame. I just, I want my son back. I want to feel like I'm part of your life, not just watching from the outside." There was another pause. "Mom, I, I need to think. Can we talk later?" I sighed, a mixture of relief and pain. At least he was listening now. At least he was aware. But the road ahead would be long, I knew it. Rebuilding the bond, reminding him that a mother's love doesn't fade, it wouldn't be easy. That night, I sat by the window, looking at the stars. I thought about all the sacrifices I had made, all the sleepless nights, all the tears I had hidden, and I realized something. No matter what, I would never stop loving my son. No matter how far he drifted, no matter how many times he forgot or ignored me, my heart would always belong to him. I also realized something else. I needed to hold on to myself, too. My life, my health, my happiness, they mattered. If I wanted to be a part of Daniel's life again, I had to be strong, not just for him, but for me. I promised myself that I would keep trying, keep reaching out, but I would also take care of my own heart. For the first time in years, I felt a tiny spark of hope. Daniel might be distant now, but love doesn't vanish overnight. Bonds forged over decades don't disappear because of distance or new priorities. And maybe, just maybe, with patience and persistence, my son would remember what we once had and want it again. It had been years since Daniel's marriage, and the distance between us felt almost permanent. But life has a way of reminding people of what they've lost. It started small. One evening, Daniel called me unexpectedly. "Hey, Mom, I was just thinking about you," he said, his voice hesitant, almost unsure. I froze, my heart skipping a beat. "Daniel, is everything okay?" I asked softly. "Yes, I realized I haven't really talked to you in a long time," he admitted. I mean, really talked. I could hear the guilt in his voice, and it hurt, but not like before. This time, it felt like the first step towards something better. We talked for a while that night, awkwardly at first, catching up on little things, sharing news about work, his apartment, and Emily. I could sense that he was trying, that he was noticing the emptiness that had grown between us. A few days later, Emily called me. I was hesitant at first, unsure of what to expect, but when she spoke, her voice was soft, apologetic. "Mrs. Parker, I wanted to say I'm sorry. I didn't realize how much distance had grown between you and Daniel, and, well, I feel like I pushed you away without meaning to."
I blinked back tears, not believing what I was hearing. "Emily, it's okay. I miss my son. I want to be part of his life again." There was silence for a moment. "I know, and I want that too," she said. "I think maybe we can start over, slowly. I don't want you to feel left out anymore." Hearing those words felt like sunlight breaking through a long, cold winter. For the first time in years, I felt a glimmer of hope, not just in Daniel, but in Emily as well. A few weeks later, Daniel invited me over for dinner. He cooked the meal himself, a rare treat, since Emily usually handled the cooking. When I arrived, he hugged me tightly, a hug that felt like coming home after a long lost journey. "I've missed this," he whispered, holding on to me a little longer than usual. I didn't realize how much I'd let things slip away. We sat down, ate, and laughed. Small moments, but monumental in their significance. It wasn't perfect. There were still awkward pauses, unspoken words, years of distance. But it was a start, a crack in the wall that had separated us for so long. Emily joined in too, smiling warmly. "We want you to be part of our lives again," she said. "Really part of it. No more sidelines." And for the first time in years, I felt like myself again, not just a mother longing from afar, but a mother present, cherished, and remembered. That night, as I drove home, I realized something profound. Love doesn't vanish. It might get buried under distance, misunderstandings, or the busyness of life, but it never truly disappears. And when the heart is ready, it can find its way back. After that first dinner, things slowly began to change. It wasn't sudden. Life didn't magically return to the way it had been when Daniel was a child. There were still moments of awkwardness, small misunderstandings, and the lingering shadow of years lost. But there was also hope, warmth, and laughter returning to our lives. Daniel began inviting me over more often. Sometimes it was just the two of us, talking over coffee, reminiscing about old memories, the ridiculous board games he used to insist I cheat at, the long Sunday morning pancakes, the times we got caught in the rain on our walks. Other times it was family dinners with Emily, where I could see her trying to bridge the gap, creating a space where all three of us felt connected. I noticed subtle changes in Daniel too. He started checking in more often. Little texts. "Mom, thinking of you. How's your day?" Or, "Can we watch that old movie you love tonight?" At first, I couldn't believe it. After so many years of silence, these small gestures felt monumental, but slowly they became real. One Sunday afternoon, we took a drive together, just the two of us. Daniel was behind the wheel, and I sat in the passenger seat, watching the landscape roll by, feeling a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. "Mom, I know I've been distant," he said quietly. "I got caught up in everything. Emily, work, life. I didn't mean to make you feel forgotten. I just didn't realize." I reached over and touched his hand. "I know, Daniel. I understand. But I missed you every single day." "I missed you too, Mom," he admitted,
his voice thick with emotion. "I don't ever want to let that happen again." We laughed, we cried, and shared stories, both old and new. That day, I realized the bond we had lost wasn't gone. It had been buried under distance, but it was still there, waiting for both of us to nurture it again. Emily played her part too, though cautiously at first. She started including me in family decisions, asking for my advice, even letting me help with small things around their home. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. For the first time in years, I felt seen, valued, and loved, not just as a mother, but as part of a family again. I also began to rebuild myself. For so long, my life had revolved entirely around Daniel, and while I loved every moment of it, I realized I needed my own life too. I continued volunteering, joined a small book club, and even started taking short trips with friends. But this time, I carried Daniel's love with me, not as a burden, but as a source of strength. One evening, Daniel came over unannounced, holding a small bouquet of flowers. "For you, Mom," he said, smiling. "Just because." Tears filled my eyes. "Thank you, Daniel. That means the world to me." "I mean it, Mom. I don't ever want you to feel forgotten again. You're my mother. You've always been my mother. And I love you. Always." In that moment, I realized something profound. Love doesn't vanish. It might get buried under distance, misunderstandings, or the busyness of life, but it never truly disappears. And when the heart is ready, it can find its way back. The years of silence, distance, and quiet heartbreak had left marks on my heart, but now, slowly, they were fading. I realized that forgiveness wasn't just for Daniel or Emily, it was for me. I had carried grief, anger, and hurt for so long that it had weighed me down, made me feel smaller, almost invisible. But now, letting go of those feelings felt like breathing fresh air after being underwater for too long.
I forgave Daniel for the years he had been distant, not because he deserved it, but because I wanted my heart free. I forgave Emily for unintentionally creating the distance between us, for not realizing how much my absence would hurt. And most importantly, I forgave myself for every self-doubt, every tear, every moment I had questioned my worth as a mother. Life began to feel brighter again. Holidays, once painful reminders of absence, became celebrations of togetherness. I baked cookies, cooked dinners, and decorated the house, but now I did it with Daniel and Emily by my side. We laughed over spilled frosting, teased each other over burnt pies, and shared stories that had been long buried. One Christmas, Daniel and Emily surprised me. They had decorated my house while I was out running errands. Lights twinkled in every corner, a wreath hung on the door, and a small gift sat on the kitchen table. Daniel hugged me tightly and whispered, "Mom, we want you to be part of every moment from now on. Always." Tears streamed down my face. "Daniel, you don't know how much I've waited to hear that." And it wasn't just the big gestures, it was the small ones, the morning texts, the late-night phone calls, the quiet moments when he would sit next to me on the couch and we would watch an old movie together, just like we used to. Those little moments reminded me that the bond between a mother and child is never truly lost. It may bend, it may stretch, it may even break temporarily, but love always finds its way back. I also took time to reflect on my own life. I realized that being a mother doesn't mean losing yourself. I had poured everything into Daniel, and it had been worth it, but now I could pour into myself too. I traveled, I learned, I laughed, and I lived fully. And when I shared my joy, my stories, my time, Daniel always wanted to be there. One afternoon, we sat together, Daniel, Emily, and I, looking through a box of old photographs. Baby Daniel in my arms, his first day of school, birthday parties, family vacations, and we laughed, and we cried, and we remembered. "Daniel," Daniel said softly, "I know I've missed so much over the years, but I want to make up for it. I want you to know that you are the most important person in my life, always." "I know, Daniel," I replied, my voice trembling, "and I love you, always have, always will." That evening, as I sat by the window watching the sun set and feeling the warmth of my son's love once again, I realized that heartbreak can teach you patience, distance can teach you resilience, and being forgotten can remind you of the strength of a mother's love. The journey had been long and painful. I had wept in silence, felt invisible, questioned my worth, and carried the ache of a child's absence. But now that pain had transformed into gratitude, gratitude for the bond we had rebuilt, for the love that never truly disappeared, and for the lessons that made me stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. Life, I realized, is not about avoiding heartbreak, it's about holding on, forgiving, and allowing love to guide you back to where you belong. And I had found my way back to my son, to my family, and most importantly, to myself. After the long years of distance, every small moment with Daniel felt like a gift. We began celebrating milestones together again, not just the big ones, but the ordinary ones, the quiet victories and simple joys that I had once taken for granted. His birthday that year was the first one we truly celebrated since his marriage. I baked the cake myself, just like old times, while Daniel and Emily set the table. When he saw me carrying the cake into the living room, his face lit up with genuine surprise and joy. "Daniel," he exclaimed, hugging me tightly. "Of course I remembered," I said, smiling through tears. "I never forget my son's birthday." We laughed, we sang, and we shared stories of his childhood. For the first time in years, it felt like our family was whole again. Even Emily joined in, teasing Daniel about the messy icing he accidentally smeared on his nose. Those little moments, filled with laughter, warmth, and love, felt like tiny miracles after years of absence and heartbreak. We also started creating new traditions. Every Sunday, Daniel and I would go for a walk in the park, just the two of us, talking about life, sharing dreams, and sometimes simply enjoying the quiet together. Emily respected those moments, understanding that they were important for both of us to reconnect. One weekend, Daniel suggested a small trip for the three of us. We drove to the countryside, away from the city's noise, and stayed in a small cabin by a lake. It was simple, quiet, and perfect. We cooked meals together, played board games late into the night, and shared stories that had been long buried. At one point, Daniel sat next to me on the porch swing, looking out over the water. "Mom, I've missed so much. I can't believe how far I let us drift apart," he said, his voice soft. "You can't change the past, Daniel," I replied gently. "All we can do is be here now and make the most of it."
He nodded, squeezing my hand. "I promise, Mom, I'll never let us drift apart again." And in that moment, I believed him. I saw the man he had become, responsible, caring, thoughtful, and I also saw the little boy I had raised, the boy who had once clung to my finger and trusted me with all his heart. Both existed in the same person, and both needed each other to feel complete. We celebrated Thanksgiving together that year in my home. Daniel helped me cook the turkey, Emily made a beautiful pumpkin pie, and I set the table with all the care I used to when he was a child. We laughed, we shared stories, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. I felt loved, seen, and valued. Even the small gestures mattered now. Daniel sending me a text in the morning just to say he was thinking of me. Emily asking for my advice on home decor. The quiet moments when we would sit together watching the sunset. These moments, though small, were powerful reminders that our bond, though tested, had endured. I realized something important during this time. Love isn't always about grand gestures or perfect moments. Sometimes it's about showing up, being present, and choosing each other every day, even after years of silence. And in those choices, in those small acts of care, the wounds of the past began to heal. Time has a way of teaching us lessons we never thought we'd need to learn. For years, I had carried a quiet sorrow in my chest, a weight it never seemed to lift. I had watched my son drift away, swallowed by his life with Emily, and I had wondered if I would ever feel his love again the way I once did. But here we were, Years later, sitting together at the dinner table, laughing, sharing stories, and celebrating life, not as separate people, not as distant family members, but as mother and son. Daniel looked at me across the table one evening, a soft smile on his face. Mom, I know I've missed so much, but I want you to know that I'll never take you for granted again. You're my mom. You always will be, and I love you. Tears filled my eyes, the kind that come from deep inside your soul. The relief, the joy, the understanding that the bond we thought was broken had been restored. Daniel, I love you too, always, and nothing will ever change that. Emily, who had once been a source of subtle tension, now stood beside me as an ally. I'm so glad we can all be together like this, she said softly. I never meant to push you away. I hope you know that I care about you too. I know, Emily, I replied, and I'm grateful for both of you, for my son, and for the love that still binds us. It wasn't a fairy tale, and it wasn't perfect. There were still moments when the past whispered through the cracks, memories of neglect, of distance, of quiet heartbreak. But those moments no longer controlled us. They had become lessons in patience, resilience, and forgiveness. We began planning more small trips together, simple things like picnics in the park, Sunday brunches, and evening walks. Each moment became a thread, weaving our family tapestry back together, stronger and more resilient than ever. I often reflected on those lonely years, the nights I spent crying quietly, the holidays celebrated alone, the phone calls left unanswered. I realized that pain and love are intertwined. You can't fully understand the depth of love without knowing the ache of absence. I had endured the heartbreak because my love for Daniel was unwavering, and that love had survived the years of neglect. One afternoon, Daniel and I were sitting on the porch swing, drinking lemonade and watching the sun dip below the horizon. He turned to me and said softly, Mom, thank you for never giving up on me, for loving me even when I didn't deserve it. I smiled, brushing a stray tear from my cheek. Daniel, you didn't know. You were young. And love doesn't measure worth. It's just there, always, even when people forget, even when life gets busy. That's what being a mother means. He took my hand, holding it gently, a gesture I had longed for during all those lonely years. I'll never forget again, he promised, and I believed him. I realized then that life is fragile, love is resilient, and family is worth every tear, every struggle, every moment of heartache. It's not always easy. Sometimes it's painful, sometimes it's quiet, and sometimes it feels like it's slipping away. But when it's real, it finds its way back. That night, as I sat alone for a brief moment, reflecting on the journey from heartbreak to restoration, I whispered a quiet prayer of gratitude for Daniel, for Emily, for the lessons learned, and for the enduring power of a mother's love. The love that once ached in silence now sang in full color, filling every corner of my heart. I had my son back, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, and completely. And in that, I found peace. I had survived the pain of being forgotten, and I had discovered the immeasurable strength of a mother's heart. And I knew, without a doubt, that no matter what challenges lay ahead, love would always guide us back to each other.